Good morning, you guys. So I am headed out to the garden to harvest some dill for a preserving project that I have that I'm planning on doing today. And so I thought I would just go ahead and bring you with me. There are a couple more things that are ready to pick, and they're the first of the season of their kind. So I'm really excited about it. And I just thought I'd bring you with me. I just spotted these this morning. I don't know how I missed them. They're so beautiful and ripe already. These are lunchbox snacking peppers, and it actually tells you on the seed pack that the red ones are really small. So they are indeed very small, but they'll be delicious, and my mom will be very excited. She loves these peppers. I had planned on showing you guys picking my first Roma tomato of the season. I was all excited about it. It's not quite fully ripe yet, but sometimes we've had a lot of birds this year and they've been attacking things. But I went and picked it, and unfortunately it has blossom end rot, which is super disappointing. But these fruits, they set when we were still getting a lot of rain, and so they were just having trouble, I think, with the calcium uptake because they had too much water. And so hopefully now that I am controlling the watering, it's going to be better. Here are my dills. Aren't they beautiful? If I happen to get enough cucumbers, we will definitely use some of those in cucumbers. And since we're here, I'm going to show you. This squash definitely got pollinated and it's growing. So I'm very excited about that. Even though these dill are flowering, there are still plenty of fronds for me to pick for my project today. So I'm just going to pull some off of several of these plants. I won't take all of them off of every plant, but here we go. Fresh dill for my preserving project today. Before we head in the house, there's one more thing I wanted to show you guys out here in the garden. So if you were here for the last garden video, you saw me plant those sad little cherry tomato plants. They're sunrise bumblebees. They were starts that I had just neglected because I'd gotten the garden all planted, but I ended up with somewhere to put them. And so I wanted to try. They only had two sad little yellow leaves. They just kind of looked like they were on death's doorstep. But I'm happy to report that they are looking so much better. They're looking so healthy. They're still really small, but I have faith that they're going to grow and we're going to get beautiful tomatoes off of them. So let me show you what those look like. I've got you down here at eye level so you can see the sad little leaves have actually turned green and they've put on a bunch of new growth. So it's only been a week and they already are looking so much better, even though they're still small. You can see next to my hand how tiny this plant is, but I have absolute faith that they are going to bounce back from how bad they were before, just based on what they look like now. Now that I'm back in the house, I've gotten out all the ingredients for my preservation project today. So I've got a couple of my cabbages that I harvested a few weeks ago, a cucumber that I picked 2 days ago. It's been in the fridge and it's still nice and firm. The dill we picked earlier today, and a few heads of garlic. So what are we making? We're going to make sauerkraut. This is obviously a slightly less traditional sauerkraut, which is normally just the salt and cabbage. But there is a brand of sauerkraut that you can buy in the refrigerator section, so it still has all that probiotic goodness to it, that does garlic and dill in their sauerkraut. And it's so good. But if I'm remembering correctly, they used to have a version that also had the sliced cucumber in it. And it just added something just a little bit special to the sauerkraut. So I want to try and replicate that today. And this will sit in a jar and ferment for a couple of weeks. And then after those couple of weeks, we'll just have a delicious probiotic rich little treat that we can have a little bit of with our meals. So I'm going to get to chopping on these vegetables. They need to be chopped up pretty fine for sauerkraut, and then we'll get them salted and put in the jar. I am going to start with the dill. This dill is old enough that it's got pretty firm stems to it, and so we are going to get those off. And I'm just going to work on getting all of those off, and then I'm going to chop the dill up nice and fine. I have the dill and the garlic all nice and finely chopped up in this bowl. And the next thing we're gonna do is peel the cucumber. This isn't something I would do if it weren't in the 90s outside, but the skin on my cucumbers has started to get bitter. And I just don't want to impart that flavor into our sauerkraut. So we're gonna peel it and then get it all sliced up as finely as I can. This would be a great job for a mandolin if you have it, where you can set a really nice thin setting to get your slices as thin as possible. But I am just going to use my knife and slice as thinly as possible. This may take me a minute since I'm trying for such thin slices. I am by no means a master knife wielder, but I feel like I'm doing pretty good. They're pretty nice and thin. So I will just throw them into my bowl as I go. I sliced up my first quarter of my cabbage to see just how I wanted to do it and how I wanted it to be in our coleslaw. And I think I figured out a nice plan. So I'm going to do a thin slice this way, and then I'm going to go back and chop it the other way a little bit so we have smaller pieces. That way we don't have these big long ribbons of cabbage in our coleslaw. If you want big long ribbons in your coleslaw, you absolutely can do it that way, but I think this will just be easier for dishing out. I'm gonna turn this a little bit, get it at a better angle for slicing. I have really enjoyed having these cabbages from the garden, and I had read in the past that they did well in clay soil, which I hadn't tried before. But if you saw in the previous videos, maybe my first or second video, I planted my cabbages and they went pretty much straight into my in-ground gardening area where it's clay soil. And this is absolutely the best cabbage harvest I've ever had. So I think we will definitely have to do that again. Here's a peek into the bowl. The cabbage is all sliced up now, and so we've got all of our vegetable ingredients into this bowl. The next step is going to be weighing our vegetables. When you're making sauerkraut, you're looking to have about 2 grams of salt for every 100 grams of cabbage, and so I need to know how much the vegetables weigh so we know how much salt we need to use. So here we go. I just weighed all of my cabbage and cucumbers and stuff, and it's 1,261 grams. Now that I have the weight of the vegetables, we can measure out our salt. So that math comes out to a little bit over 25 grams. My scale does not do partial grams. So I am going to let it round up because there is some variance on how much salt you can have. And I would rather have a little bit more than not enough, because having enough is really important to letting the good bacteria thrive in your sauerkraut. There we go, 26 grams. We are going to add the salt into our vegetables. The salt is really hard on my hands just because I have really sensitive hands. So I am going to put gloves on for this, and we're going to sprinkle this salt in and massage it into all of the vegetables. If you've never made sauerkraut before, what this is going to do is it's going to start drawing the moisture out of the cabbage and cucumbers, and probably not the dill so much, maybe not the garlic so much. But after a little while, we'll actually start seeing liquid building up in the bottom of the bowl. And that is actually what our cabbage will sit in, enough liquid most of the time will come out of your cabbage that you can completely submerge your vegetables in their own juices. I'm actually really happy. I'd mentioned earlier that I might add more cucumber, but I'm pretty happy with the ratios I'm seeing in this bowl. So now I can just let this sit for a little while now that the salt is all good and mixed in, and we will wait for those liquid elements to start coming out of our vegetables. Our sauerkraut has been sitting for probably 15 to 20 minutes, and it has shrunk a lot. It's put off a lot of its juices. I did come back once with the glove and sort of massage on it a little bit more, and so that helped it shrink up a little bit more. But you can see in the bowl, I'm trying not to tip too far so the liquid doesn't come out, but it's shrunk down a lot and there's a lot of liquid in there. So the next step is going to transfer this into our very, very clean jar. I cleaned this with very hot water and soap earlier today. And I learned this method a long time ago. I can't remember how many years, but basically these clamp top lids, when your product is fermenting and the gases are building up, it will actually shove the lid up just a little bit to let the gases out. And so you don't have to open the jar and disturb the anaerobic environment for your food to ferment in. This has worked for me in the past. I've never had my sauerkraut mold, and I have had it mold when I tried doing it in a mason jar. So this is a don't try and fix what's not broken scenario for me, and this is how we're gonna ferment our sauerkraut. I'm gonna use my canning funnel here to try and keep the lid of the jar clean. You can see it's already dirty. This is one of those things where I tend to guess on too large of a size of what jar I need. And I started with this jar. You can see the two side by side here. And this jar was only about half full. So I dumped everything back in the bowl. And now I'm going to put it in the smaller jar that I just got cleaned up really thoroughly. And we're going to put all of our lovely sauerkraut down in this jar. It might not all fit in this jar, but having a jar more appropriately sized is better for doing the fermenting. Just load some of it up, and I'm using this rolling pin to really pound the sauerkraut down into the jar. A big part of our goal is getting those liquids released from the veggies. Now, as I mentioned, I did this in the bigger jar, and so some of that liquid is already been pounded out, and so I will have to pour some of this liquid in here from out of this bowl. But that is not a problem. I can tell you I already just had a little taste to see what I thought of the salt level, and it does have a really lovely dill garlicky flavor. So once we get that sour taste added after it's fermented, it's going to be delicious. I just want to show you guys switching from this jar to this jar, which is nice and full. And you can see I have a nice layer of brine here at the top covering my cabbage. This is all that was left. So honestly, we'll probably just go ahead and eat that fresh. But just don't be afraid to pivot if you realize you've grabbed the wrong size bowl or a container or whatever, because clearly changing containers was the right move here. Now that our sauerkraut is all packed in the jar and it has a nice layer of brine, I can go ahead and close this jar up. I will put this on a plate somewhere cool. The plate is because it's not uncommon during the fermenting process for liquid to actually come out of the jar. So you just want that for a precautionary measure. But it will sit for about a week to 2 weeks. I'm guessing this time of year, as warm as it is, that it's going to ferment closer to a week just because warmer weather means faster fermenting. But I can see all of these beautiful dill pieces in here and see some of those little bits of cucumber and that little taste I had earlier. I think we're going to get really close to that store-bought sauerkraut that I was talking about earlier. And so I'm really looking forward to this when it's ready. Thank you for hanging out with me today in my garden and in my kitchen. And I hope you have a wonderful day. Bye.